Hey, what's up? Today we're going to be doing some problems for math, and we're going to start with this one. This one is from Khan Academy. We have this equation. It looks like it's cube root of 8y raised to 27, and it's asking for which of these. By the way, you see the right answer here because you see the right answer here. This is a screenshot, but I'm going to show you what the process is to get this answer. It's just asking for the equivalent expression, right? So how do we find the right result? How do we find the equivalent expression? First thing that we should do is I'm going to come to my whiteboard here, or blackboard. Alright, okay, first step we have to do is to split the problem in half. So we have to split the problem in half. Why? Because although this cube is affecting the 8 and the y27, it's affecting them in different ways. So let's split them. That would look like first part, and then the second part would look like cube root of y27. And so now we've split them into two equations here, right? And now we can simply solve them. What number multiplied by 8 gives you what number multiplied by 8 3 times gives you 8? Well, 2 times 2 times 2, this is 4, and this is 8. So 2 times 3 gives you 8. So the result here would be 2. Right, the result of this first equation would be just 2. Now over here there's an important rule that we have to talk about, that is the power over root. This is the root, this is a power. When you have that, you do power over root, which means power over root. So essentially you're deleting the whole thing and you're deleting the cube root, and now you just have y27, y raised to 27 over 3, because the power that was 3 is now dividing, right? That it's the divisor. Now 27 over 3, we know that's 9, so this is gonna turn into y9, and now we just put them together again. So 2y9, and that's exactly option 2 here in the photo. I mean option B. Okay, I accidentally answered this question before starting to record, so you see the answer there, but it says in the equation shown, B is a constant, and for what value B does the equation have no solutions? So I think we can do this two ways. One is using Desmos, which is how I solved it. Second is, these are just lines in the xy plane. We just have to find, actually, for them to have the same, the answer you see it is -5. So if they both have the same slope of -5, then they would have the same slope, different y-intercepts, and that makes them have no solution. I guess you can realize that, or you could graph it on Desmos. I think that takes a bit longer, but that's what I did. So graph it x plus 1/3, and then just add a slider for B and test numbers until you'll get to -5, and then you'll see that they have no solutions. If you plug any of the other options like 0, they all have solutions. +5 has a solution. So best thing I guess you could realize that if this is -5x, then this has to be -5x for them to have no solution, but you could also confirm it here on Desmos. Okay, this next problem also gave me a bit of a headache because I didn't know the process to solve it. So it's asking for which of these options is equivalent to this whole thing. Okay, the first step to solving this is that we can realize that we can factor the 2 on this fraction this way. So this is the fraction on the bottom here. 2 times 8 gives you 2a, 2 times 3 gives you 6, right? That's the same thing but factored. So right now we have something like that, right? And we are dividing this by this. So what do you do when you're dividing a fraction by a fraction? You multiply by the reciprocal. Okay, so this would be how the multiplication by the reciprocal would look like. We just flip the fraction and we are multiplying. So what happens here is that the two c's cancel out, the 2's cancel out, so now you just have a plus 6 over a plus 3, and that matches option B here, a plus 6 over a plus 3. That's true. This question may look very intimidating at first with all those big numbers and variables. It's asking for, again, which of these expressions is equivalent. You can see it's option D. And so here's how I thought of this. First, I realized that no matter how difficult or intimidating a fraction like this looks, it is still a subtraction because there's a minus here. And in order to add or subtract fractions, we know that we have to have the same number on the bottom, the same denominator. And then I realized that you could multiply the 4w and the 3 times 7, both of those times 7, and you would get the 28w, because 4w times 28 is times 7 is 28w, and then 3 times 7 is 21. So you would get the same denominator. But when you multiply a bottom, you also have to multiply the top. And if you multiply the top, then you would get 7 times 3v, which is 21v, plus 70. And there's a minus here. You see it, the minus over there. So that minus multiplies each of the terms here. So this 21 becomes negative 21, and minus times plus means minus. So that that plus turns into minus 70. And then we have an 8 here. So 8 minus 21 makes it 8. So 8 minus 21 makes it 8, right? So we have negative 13. 8 minus 21 makes it negative 13 minus 70, and our common denominator 28w plus 21, and you can see that matches option D. Okay, I was also confused by this problem here. I didn't know what to do. It's asking for the equivalent. Again, all of these problems are asking for the equivalent version of the equation. So what do we do here? At first, and you see I picked 1. I had picked 1 because I thought that we could just cancel the x over y and we would just be left with 1. But it turns out that I learned that because the 1 is adding the x over y, then we can't really cancel. Like, the x over y is trapped with the 1 because it's an addition. If it was a multiplication, then we would be able to cancel the x, y's, but not in this case because it's adding. So what do we do here? It's an addition of fractions. We have to have the same denominator, same trick. So in order to have the same denominator, okay, what denominator is this? This is just y, which means we can make the denominator here y, and the top, of course, y as well. So that's going to look like y over y, the y over y plus xy. That's because they have the same denominator. Because they have the same denominator, we can just combine them. It's going to look like y plus x over y. And then that's the bottom. And then, that's the top. And then the bottom would look something like, well, the same thing, right? X over y. So what do we want to do here? Now we are dividing, multiply by the reciprocal. So let's multiply by the reciprocal, y over x. What do we do here? We just cancel the y's. We cancel the y's because they're the same. And then we are left with y plus x over x. And that is option B. Alright, moving on to the last problem. And this is actually going to be an important one because there's a concept that I'm going to explain that I just learned called difference of squares. So we have this expression and it's saying which of the following is equivalent to this expression. Ignore this, x doesn't equal 2. That's just a mathematical rule that prevents us from dividing, or that, yeah, the SAT just says that so we can not be worried about x being 0 and us dividing by 0. So the next thing we're going to do to solve this is we are adding fractions. Again, we have to have the same common denominator. What is our common denominator here? X is positive, over here x is negative. Easiest thing we can do, the first thing I did while on my first attempt was that I multiplied this fraction on the left by -1 to turn the sign of that way multiplying by -1 would turn 2 into a positive and x into a negative, which would match the slope of this fraction. But that's not what we want to do. Why? Because if we multiply by -1 the left fraction, we also have to multiply the top, and we get -x squared, which makes it difficult to factor. So we are not going to do that. Instead, we can multiply -1 by the left fraction, right? And bottom and top. If we multiply the bottom by -1, it's going to give us -2 positive x, which is what we have here. So now we have the same common denominator. We also multiply this by -1, which is -4. So we're going to have x squared minus 4 over x minus 2. That's what we're going to have. And none of the options match our answers. So what do we have to do? This is where the concept comes in. We have to realize that whenever we see a short form, an expression that's short like this, and there's a letter that's perfectly squared, and there's a number that can be perfectly squared, that means this can just be 2 over 2, which is 4. So that number can be perfectly squared. We have, what I just learned is a difference of squares, because we have a minus. Minus is important because that's what says it is a difference. Having two numbers that can be perfectly squared and being in a short expression, that means we have a difference of squares. And when we have a difference of squares, that means you are just multiplying two parentheses to get this. And we have to find the parentheses that we're multiplying by to get this. So it doesn't take too long to realize that if you multiply x minus 2 times x plus 2, you'll get this exact same result here, right? X squared, let me actually do it here. So the foiling, let me do the foiling. That would be x squared plus 2x minus 2x. This is just going to turn into a 0 basically. This x doesn't exist. -2 times 2 is 4, -4. So that's what we get, same as this thing, right? So because these two things are the difference of squares, we can set that to be the top, the numerator. Denominator was x minus 2, and here we can easily cancel the x minus 2's and only get x plus 2, which then is the same thing as x plus 2, and that's option A here. So that's it.